If it had been shit, I would have said it was shit.
Alright, what's my worst song?
Your worst song?
Go on. I was going to ask what my best song is, but I feel like this is way better. Hey, I'm L Devine and you're listening to Growing Pains. Today I'm joined by none other than the man, the myth, the legend, my dad, Nigel Devine. He's Newcastle's infamous social butterfly, bit of a questionable reputation, but I know everyone would agree that he has a heart of pure gold. A few years ago, he started his own company, Orbis Support, which is an organisation that supports people with learning disabilities and complex needs, as well as being the absolute rock for every single one of his friends and family. So let me tell you a bit about this dad. As you know, I'm a singer-songwriter, and my main inspiration when it comes to songwriting are my experiences navigating through adolescence. So I decided it would be a cool idea to invite my friends, my family, and just generally cool people to the recording studio and chat about their own coming-of-age stories. Hi, Dad.
Hello.
Thanks for coming down to London, all the way from Newcastle to
I'm
be on
delighted
this.
to be here. My pleasure.
So start off, to break the ice,
Yeah.
I asked you to bring a photo of you when you were a coming of age
Yeah.
teenager. So what have you got for it?
Well, it's interesting really because it's two things. It's connected to music and it's based in London. It's a picture of myself and John Peel, who was a huge hero of mine. And about 1981, however long ago that was, myself and a couple of friends came down to London to collect a petition, signatures for a petition to get a music venue opened up in Newcastle. And
I didn't know that was why you were down here. That's so cool.
Yeah, and we met John Peel and had a brief chat with him, and he said, I'm a bit busy at the moment, but if you come down next Friday, I'll meet you for a beer and you can come on my show.
That's so cool. And you came on the show?
The following week we came down, weren't expecting him to be there, and he was there on the dot. And,
That's so cool. What a legend.
It was an amazing experience, and as a result of that, my friends got sessions with John Peel, and he signed his signature, supported what became Riverside, which was an amazing
was that the venue
venue
that you got open?
Well,
So
I
you were
didn't.
behind. Well, yeah.
I
but
wasn't
you were,
a very, very minimal part, but my friend
Wow,
Keith
that's so
Jeffries
cool.
became the guy who drove that, and I think absolutely every band
I didn't
you
know
can
that.
imagine, from Oasis to Elvis Costello to, I mean, every person and band you can think of played there. Sadly, it closed down a few years ago, but it was there for a generation and influenced a lot of people.
That's so cool. And what were you wearing on this pic? What's going on with your hair? And you're like, was that like the?
I think
Was
I
that like?
had
Were you cool at the time? Were you like?
I hoped I was. It was kind of secondhand, punky-ish. I was with a band called Darkness and Jive, who I wasn't in the band, but they were my friends who eventually got a session. And I think I had like
That's
a
cool.
mohair jumper with a stripy top and a jacket with some badges on, which was
Badges.
kind of
That's
cool at the
That
time.
is pretty cool.
Uh,
Who was that person? Like in that photo, if you could like describe that person, what would you say about them?
That person was probably somebody who was trying to find their way, really. I was maybe trying to be a part of something that I didn't really feel I belonged to. Like, I always felt that I wasn't the coolest person. I always felt that the people in the band were cooler than me, that I had something to live up to in a sense. But they were good friends. I just couldn't play any instruments, and didn't really feel I was as cool as them.
Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in a place called Wallsend, which is about 4 miles away from Newcastle, in between where you grew up, Whately Bay, and Newcastle.
Yeah.
At the time, it was a real working class shipbuilding town. There was 26,000 people employed at the bottom of my street building ships that sailed across the world. In Swan Hunters, it had coal mines. It was a hard place to grow up. It was rough, but it had something about it that I think I never ever forget. And even now, I haven't lived there 20 years. I would still say I'm from that town. I'm from that community, and funny enough, Sting grew up round the corner from me, about
Yeah.
100 yards, and went to the same primary school. And
Was he in what year? Was he in? He's younger than you, right? Or older than you?
Sting's younger than me.
I don't know. Is
He's
he
about 10 years older than me,
I
I think
didn't
he is.
know
Yeah.
that. I thought you were like the same age.
Sting was I think he's nearing 70 now, Sting.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
God. Oh, he looks good. You need to like
But,
ask him for his skincare routine or something.
yeah.
What was school like for you?
I think in my early years, I really enjoyed it. I'm from a family of like 5 kids, and I mean, you probably know the stories. We didn't really have a great deal of cash, and
What was that like at home? Like growing up with like all his brothers and
honestly, it was
sisters?
really tough. You know what I mean?
Really?
It was very tough. I think my dad didn't work a great deal, so I remember like as a kid. The big influence, I think, on my career in terms of supporting people with autism and disabilities and the human rights is all born from being on things like free dinners and stuff. And I remember thinking, this is horrendous that they call, kids
Free
out
dinners,
and say,
line
here's
them
your
up and,
ticket,
like,
different colour ticket,
shocking.
you're on free dinners. And I remember that just the humility and the shame of
Yeah.
that at the time. But I do recall thinking this is wrong, and I think it's kind of instilled this fight into me to when I see those kind of injustices. I think they have to be challenged. I was a little bit naughty and a little bit mischievous,
Yeah.
and I remember they had issues with me with we used to call him the wag man. That meant somebody who played truant. There was a guy who used to come round and try and catch kids who were playing truant from school. So I remember going through a phase where I hardly went to school, which I deeply regret now. And then that clearly impacted on my exams. But I used to do like interesting things with my mates and go places that I wouldn't dream of, like when you were a kid, of allowing that to happen. Do you know what I mean?
Like what? Give us a story of like the naughtiest thing you did. With your mates.
Naughtiest things. I mean, we used to go to pubs,
I think I did
14,
that, like, when I was
but at
14.
14 in school times we would pinch things, we'd go off for, I remember going to Liverpool one day on a train,
Not telling
randomly,
anyone.
with a couple of friends, and
Cool.
nobody knew until we got thrown off the train. But I always had like this thing that I guess one of the things in growing up in Wallsend is you're destined to go to the shipyards. So it was just like seen as a formality that you left school and you got a trade at the shipyards. And for some reason, I never ever wanted to do that. I thought I'll never go into the shipyards.
So everyone your age was expected to go away.
Most people, I think there were only, when I went to school, there was only, I'm sure it was only 6 people went to university from my year. So it was a very different era, different expectations, I think, for kids. Like, and the expectation was you went to school, you went to the shipyards, you went to the social club, you got married, and I never ever wanted that, really.
Yeah.
Apart from the marriage, I did get married eventually.
Well, I got married a few times actually.
Twice.
What? Yeah, twice married, 1 engagement.
Yeah.
Okay, we don't need to go into that.
Got a lot of love.
Did you have any embarrassing moments, or like, what was like the most awkward thing about being a teenager?
I remember, this is like, I think it was an embarrassing moment. I could probably think of a few, but I remember once, like, one of the teachers, I'd done something, I can't remember what it was. It wasn't, really bad, but we were at PE, and I remember in those days you could hit the kids. So he decided to, I had to be hit. I'd bend over. I had shorts on, I remember, and he hit us with a trainer, like I think it was an Umbro trainer. The reason I say that is because he left the imprint on my backside, and I remember like physically being sick with the pain, but then going home and telling my parents, if somebody done that to you,
Yeah,
I would
you
have
would
been,
be in
I would have been in
crazy.
jail.
And your parent
And they were like, "What have you
well,
done?
deserved
What did you
it.
do wrong?" I never. So I
That's
remember
crazy.
that. That was a bit embarrassing.
When do you think that changed? Like, when did that shift, that if I told you that you would be straight at school and have, like, got them sat, like, obviously you're not allowed to hit kids anymore, but like, if
I know. That was in the 70s that happened. So I guess it's maybe started to change maybe late 80s, because I remember the time, like, the politics, even things started to, in my opinion, started to go backwards. So like Margaret Thatcher came in, and I'm not a big fan of Tories in any way, shape or form. But I remember things like they started to do stuff around, like, not talking about gay people in schools. I think it was called, was it Section 28 or something like that. So it went backwards, I think, in the early 80s, and then my opinion is that it started to change in the late 80s, and we started to become more liberal and accepting. And I definitely, work-wise, I can remember when I started work, seeing people coming out of hospitals, for example, the community being the thing that, was important for people, and a lot of changes, really positive changes came about. So it probably changed about that time.
which song did you have on repeat when you were a teenager?
Songs that I play, and I still play it to this day. Rock Lobster by the B-52s. I just love that, because I remember going to, like, this disco or whatever. Fleetwood Mac, some of Fleetwood Mac songs.
Yeah.
I mean, in 1977, I think Rumours came out. I would have been about 16 then.
Really?
And that, I remember thinking...
Was it cool to be into them back then, or was it?
I don't think it...
Because I always remember you telling me that you loved a lot of music that everyone thought wasn't cool.
Oh yeah, I'll tell you who I really loved, and I got loads of grief for it, was Billy Joel.
Yeah. This is what we were talking about. Yeah.
So I got, and that's why I think, talking about before, when, like, what my mates were like, musicians and talented and punky and trendy and cool, and so they would be like, "Oh, you like Billy Joel," which is interesting, because one of them recently was saying how much they liked Billy Joel. And I said, I was 30 years ahead of you. Do you know what I mean? So, and my friends and I went on that little tour with U2 with their first album.
Yeah, you love this story. Tell that story quickly, actually.
Oh, so
because that is cool.
Me and my friends went off. I didn't even know who they were initially, but he said, "Come on this 6-day tour with U2," and it was, I mean, again, it was early 80s, I think it was. So we ended up going with them. Not many people knew who they were, but we got on pretty well with them. Then we ended up going I think it was 30 or 40 gigs in Europe and stuff like that. And as we were going along with them, they were getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then I think at the end of the tour, they got #1 album. We didn't see them again, and off we went, different lives. And then 25 years later or something, somebody got an email saying, "Hey, the lads were, like, going through a diary or something like that, and had the names of people who were there back in the day when we first started off. Like,
so cool.
Can you make contact?" And they said, "You can come and see us at any gig, anywhere." And I was like, wow, you know what I mean? I thought I hadn't followed them, religiously for a long time, but I just thought that was a pretty cool thing to do. That remember people.
You went to the show, right? Or did you?
Went to the show, and
didn't you get Auntie Lisa and Auntie Julie and
my
backstage?
sisters, they embarrassed themselves, like,
As
screaming for
usual.
Bono, and drunk and disorderly, and embarrassing. So they ruined it for us. But apart from that, it was lovely, because I don't know, it's one of those things, isn't it? Did they recognise us or not? But they were like, "Oh my God, it's been 25 years." I was like, "I bet you don't know my name." Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But no, it was
so
a fantastic thing to do.
What was the biggest difference between growing up in the 60s and 70s when you did, compared to someone growing up right now?
I think a lot more acceptance, I suppose, in a sense now. If I look back and I always say with this, there was one lad in my year who I knew was gay, just one person. And I think that's very different now. There weren't any people with disabilities in my school.
Really?
I think parenting was different.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'll be honest with you, like the town that I was from, like blokes were blokes, and you didn't, demonstrate your love. Some guys would have done,
Yeah.
but it was very, very different in terms of the roles, I guess. You know what I
Right.
mean, between men and women, and that was different. So yeah, I would say that. I don't
think
know.
that-
Social media wasn't around. I mean, I think you cannot escape that, or It's,
I mean, God, some of the things that you did when you were younger, if they were online, I don't know if you let out the house. I don't know.
But I think you're right. I think that, like, see, in my work, like, some of the people that I work with will have files going back to when they're children, and I always say to people that people that read those files and see them in a negative light. And I was saying, if you'd kept a file on me from being a child,
Yeah.
going through my my childhood, my adolescence, in my adulthood, I would have tons of labels attached to me as well. So I think that the biggest difference is for me social media and the negative impact that can have on young people. And I'm thinking, in a sense, I try to protect you and Sophie from that, growing up as much as I could.
Is there any of your younger self that you see in me?
Yeah,
If so,
definitely.
what?
Humour, definitely. I think passion for issues, and I think that the big difference between me and you is that it took me longer to get the confidence to be able to stand up for myself and challenge, and I think possibly that was around education initially, but I think you definitely got that kind of banter, and I think you're into the rights of people, and I think you're like I think you've got like a lot of courage, and you can be ballsy when you need to be. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Thank you.
And obviously, me and you are both beautiful.
No, I'll get that from my mum, definitely. Is there any advice that you would give to me?
Just be yourself. That's what I admire about you. Really, I think you. Yeah.
I think that's the nice thing about our relationship. I don't think you need to give me any advice, really.
Yeah.
Not that I've
No.
I don't know. I've always felt like as your equal rather than like
Yeah.
a parent. Like, not you are a parent, you're
No,
a
I
great
agree.
parent, but I've some kids that you see and parents try to dictate their whole lives and plan out their lives for them,
Yeah.
and I've always just felt as
I totally agree with you. I think I always had this thing about you when you first started to write music and perform music, and I've seen lots of parents and who've sat on the touchline of their son's football match and been screaming, or at the daughter's performance somewhere, and you and I have seen those families when we've been touring. You know what I mean? The adulation that they get.
totally 100%.
And I would always have, the first time you sent me a song, I think you would know and I would know that if it had been shit, I would have said it was shit. Do you know what I mean? I certainly wouldn't want you out there like thinking you were the best thing since sliced bread when you weren't.
Yeah.
No, but
yeah, he's definitely told me some things are shit.
but yeah, I would.
All right, what's my worst song?
Your worst song?
Go on. I was gonna ask what my best song is, but I feel like this is way better.
Your worst song?
Worst song that's out as L Devine, not.
Oh, worst song that's out as L Devine.
Yeah. Oh God,
not the old stuff.
No. Worst song that's out. So people.
Can I not talk about your old stuff?
No, because people aren't gonna know it. You
Okay.
need to tell them something.
Your worst song. So I don't have a worst song. I think a song that I wouldn't listen to as much was probably. I really shouldn't say this, I guess, because
You can say this, can't you?
I don't know. I should.
Go on, say it. Say
The
it.
song that I probably wouldn't listen to would be "Party on Your Own."
Yeah, fair enough.
I wouldn't say it's a worse song. I wouldn't listen to it. I'd skip
There's better
it.
songs. I feel that. That's fine.
There's definitely better
And what's your
songs.
favourite song of mine?
I love Daughter just because of what you went through, and I was part of that at the time. I was like really raging and a bit angry, to be honest with you. I think you know that when I, you describe it in the song, don't you? Like, you're kind of your first love, and I could see that, and I knew you were gay, like from being a kid, but I could see that you were struggling a bit, and we have that piss-taking mentality, and I was kind of taking the mickey a wee bit, but I remember when it came out, the response, you know what I mean, of the person who wasn't happy about the relationship, and then I think I had a bit of a debate with her, didn't I?
A debate is like the nice way of putting it. But I think some people would be like, oh my God, don't get your dad involved, but like, I know that was so nice that you definitely always had my back.
Oh yeah,
like
always will.
Without any question. I didn't even need to ask you to do that. You were straight like onto this person, and you're actually surprisingly eloquent about it as well. I don't think you ever had to. No, but really, you weren't like, it wasn't like you're this. Like you actually put her in her place, but with wise words. I feel.
Yeah, I could identify with Daughter much more than I can identify with Naked Alone, for example.
Oh God, okay, that's not. We don't need to open that can of worms, definitely.
It goes against everything that you taught her, but I'm sorry, miss, I'm in love with your daughter. Said what about kids, all the hopes I had for her? Well, I'm sorry, miss, I'm in love with your daughter.
So you were obviously really, really supportive of my music. You came to like I don't think you've missed one gig maybe.
Yeah.
Out of like, I mean, not as L Devine, but when I was busking and doing gigs around Newcastle and every pub and club.
Yeah.
My dad never missed. I think he missed about like one.
I had to be working in Plymouth.
Yeah.
And
which is crazy. He must have done hundreds of them, and he had to listen to the same shite songs on my guitar like over and over and over again. And I also had no concept of what like songwriting was or what structure was, so these songs went on for about 7 minutes. So like they were awful.
I won't sing the one that went on for 7 minutes.
Okay, don't. But what I was going to ask is that you were so supportive of me. Do you think that if you told your parents you wanted to be a pop star when back in the day when you were my age, would they have been as supportive? What would they have said? Like I feel like you were hands on, not like you know, like you said, like these pushy kind of show parents, like. But you were present and supportive and encouraging. Do you think your parents would have been the same?
I don't know. I mean, I never had that like talent or gift that you had, that natural talent or gift. If I'd been an amazing footballer, I'll be honest with you. My dad would. I never went anywhere with him. I was just talking about this the other day. I never went to a museum or a restaurant or anything.
Were you close? Not at
all?
all?
No, not at all.
Really?
Not in the slightest. My mum would have been proud of us, do you know what I mean? But I think she probably wouldn't have. I don't know what she would have done. But with you, I loved music. I had lots of contacts locally, I guess, in the music sense. Mm-hmm. So it was easier for me in the sense that as soon as I knew you had that talent and that gift, it was like, well, let's get out there. And I remember you being absolutely terrified on your first gig. Well, not just the first gig, but the first 50 gigs. I think you used to be terrified, and remember I used to say. It's
funny looking back because there would have been 2 people in the room at the Surf Cafe on the first night I played or something. Well, actually, there was a few people. Sam Fender was doing the buskers night actually, and he was the one who was like doing my mic stand, sorting the sound out, and.
Your first gig,
crazy.
He was
First gig, first time I ever played in front of anyone, and Sam was there.
Yeah, I know.
That was the first time I met Sam. It's crazy.
And he was behind the bar and he was helping you, and I seen him about 2 nights later, and I said, "Oh, thanks for doing that." And I remember him saying, "That was sick," and I was like, "What do you mean by that?" I didn't realise that's sick. I was like, wasn't down with the kids. You know what I mean? But and then I remember another time when you had a booking in Durham.
Oh, God.
And I don't know, I had something wrong with my car or something, so we had to jump in a taxi, 80 quid. And when we got there was
like
nobody.
One person there.
Yeah. I don't think there was anybody in the place.
There was one person, it was the guy, the promoter that put on the fucking gig.
And the taxi driver.
And the taxi driver came watch it as well.
He did.
Bless
So
him,
you
because
might
we
as
were
well
like,
wait
we
here.
need you to take us back afterwards.
it was me, you, the taxi driver, the promoter, and I just spent 80 quid on
And
a
I
taxi.
think I got paid 60 quid for the gig and I had to give straight back there.
Yeah.
No, I didn't.
Never
give it
ever
back.
give us any money back. But don't be saying that on the mic. Oh my God. No.
What would you tell your younger self if you could go back and meet Nigel in that photo and sit and just tell him anything? It doesn't even have to be advice, just like, what would you...
I mean, I'd tell him to be a bit more, have a more belief in himself, I think. I'd tell him to be maybe more at ease with himself. Like, you don't have to try to be somebody else. You know what I mean? That I think like the most liberating thing is for me growing up was when I did actually feel comfortable in my own skin and thinking, you know what I mean? I don't have to.
When was that moment?
Honestly, I think it was like in my late 20s because I think because I'd studied then and I'd gone to university and I felt, you know, more self-worth, I guess. Do you know what I mean? So that's the difference, I think, between you and I. I've seen that in you much earlier, which is fantastic. And I'm not saying that, you know, I influenced in that in any way. You know, there's lots of influencing factors, but 100%, it definitely took me until my late 20s, I think, to reach that point in my life. Do you know what I mean? And then I never looked back.
I'm L Devine and that was Growing Pains. Thank you so much for listening. I was with my dad today, Nigel. Thanks for coming on, Dad.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Also, a massive thank you to Levi's for letting us use their studio. Hit subscribe on Apple Podcasts, follow me on Spotify or wherever you find your favourite shows to be updated with each new episode.